We're live. Hello. Welcome everyone to episode 2 of DeSci Peaks. Today we are talking about DEI and DeSci. But as always, and I say as always as though we've done many of these episodes, but we've really done one. As always, the first 30 minutes are just going to be a recap of the news from the previous month. Some big things we're probably going to be talking about: the Gitcoin Alpha round, DeSci Denver, Hair DAO did a token raise, and DeSci Labs has their beta launch. And for those 30 minutes, if you want to jump onto the live stream, you just go into our Discord, you click a link that we post in there, and you're brought into the StreamYard. We're going to bring everyone who's in the studio up in just a moment, and we can have a discussion. Everyone's welcome to join for this part. If you don't want to come live on stream, go to the Science Commons Initiative YouTube, where there is a chat, and we'll bring those chat discussions into the live stream. And of course, you can bring up any news topic you want to talk about. It doesn't need to be the 4 things I just said. Woo! Solid intro, yeah? Did I miss anything?
Nope. Very, very good. This is going to kind of be Ideas Collide, the State of the DeSci space segment. So, yeah, we're open to talk about everything. We have guests already in the background looking to come up.
Yep, and once we get to we'll introduce the people who will be talking about DEI specifically once we get to that segment. Otherwise, anyone who comes up, feel free to introduce yourself as we go, and it just happens to be also the guests for the second half are here in the studio. So I'm going to bring folks up right now, and here we go. Hello, everybody. If you don't want to be here for this segment, just let me know, and I can take you off and put you in the back studio.
Oh, look at that. We have such a good team. I know pretty much everyone here I've met in person.
I know, Lindsay, Tammy, so good to see you after Denver.
I know, Renee as well. Oksana, we have not met in person, but hopefully one day soon we'll meet in person. Sybil, I don't know who you are. So everybody, please take the time to introduce yourselves briefly. The 3 speakers who we're going to have in our next segment that are going to be our leaders on the discussion on DI are here. So they can give their intro here and we can introduce them again later on. But yeah, please, anybody start off. Introduce yourself and what you guys want to talk about. Okay, I'll pick. Oh, no, there you go, Tammy.
Okay. I was like, I'll go. Hello, everyone. So great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome. It's great to hang out and have these discussions. So I'm excited about today. My name is Dr. Tammy. I am a strategist, educator, consultant, author, and speaker. I help you move in the direction of more and prepare for what's next. And I do that. One of the ways I do that is in Web3. So thank you for having me.
Of course, Lindsay, go for it.
Okay,
always good to have you, Tammy.
It's nice to meet you, Tammy, and thanks to John and Jelani for having me here today. My name is Lindsay. I am a postdoc at Stanford University. I study psychedelics for treating mental health disorders like depression and anxiety and addiction. And I am pretty new to this DeSci world, but I am not new to this idea of really accessible education, DEI initiatives, kind of breaking down this ivory tower for accessible science.
Hooray! Also, someone we met in Denver.
And a new entrant into the space. I think she's going to have a lot of good insight into what this space may need in terms of bringing more people in. Renee, do you want to go ahead? You want to go next?
Sure. Hey, everybody. Renee. I am the founder of Talent DAO, organizational psychologist, and data scientist. Been deep in this space for a couple years now, building in DeSci, and more recently started lobbying for digital rights and data privacy and blockchain tech in the US. So excited to be here. I'm going to keep it short and sweet.
Awesome. No, you were just
Renee
down
is our
somewhere.
Local DeSci badass, or one of the DeSci badasses there.
You were just down in DC, I think, during an event, yeah?
So I was actually at the state capitol of Florida for
that crazy bill they're putting through, yeah,
separate but unrelated set of policies. I also spend a good amount of my time advocating for LGBTQ communities and human rights, and feeling personally attacked here in Florida, and I find myself distracted from entrepreneurship and sort of a matter of survival that I'm also doing activism in that space. But yeah, I was in Tallahassee. It was a good 2 days. We had about 200 people show up. We worked with a policy team, and it was a fun time. I learned a lot. Definitely taught me how to organize different volunteer workforces. So definitely be taking that knowledge back to crypto lobbying that I'm doing.
Awesome. And Joycelyn and Sybil, if you
Awesome.
want
to do the honors of introducing yourself now.
I'm happy to. I'm Oksana, actually, and infectionista. It's because I'm infectionist. I'm a medical doctor, and I'm a founder of Jocelyn DAO. It's another one, DeSci initiative, of course. Yes, and we are for scientists, for investors who want to invest in science, and we are on the not familiar for everyone blockchain. It's blockchain Gosh. It's not VM compatible, but it's very, very promising in different features. Thank you for being here. It's a very interesting discussion, I think, and I will be happy to be involved.
Cool. And Sybil,
Awesome.
do you have a mic? Johnny, I'm wondering if we're getting a little lag between you and me. Is it me or you? We keep doing a pause and then we start talking at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. I think my internet's being a little bit buggy. You lead that.
Okay, Sybil, if you want to jump off your mic, you're more than welcome to. Okay, if not, feel free to jump in wherever you want. Otherwise, we'll just go into the news from the last week. And since I know, Oksana, you didn't get a chance to go to Denver, but since that was the big event, we got 3 people here from Denver. Might as well just start with that. So for folks who don't know, DeSci Denver took place over the course of ETH Denver. It was about February 26th, I think, 27th through March 2nd. And that was sort of the whole block of ETH Denver. Across that block, there were 4 different DeSci events held across 3 different venues on 3 different days. There was DAO Denver, where I think the highlight was we had I think 12 or 13 DAOs present to the DAO Denver crew. And then we had ETH Denver, where the highlight was definitely getting the input, at least from my perspective, of Lindsay and some other people outside of the DeSci space on how DeSci can build for scientists more than just for itself. And then we also had Shelling Point, which was an entire day of programming with a wide range of different talks and panels. Lots of great information is now out there. I think you can go find the DAO Denver stream on YouTube. I know for sure Shelling Point has broken up all the talks and panels and uploaded them to the Gitcoin Media YouTube. So anyone who spoke there can go find the video. And if you missed out, you can go find those recordings as well. And I'm not sure actually what happened with the ETH Denver stuff. So this is something we might be able to talk about. It was an interesting sort of planning thing. It was largely me and Shadi and a handful of volunteers who gave a lot of time to put it in. I'll find a list of names later to shout out. But it was a facilitation event, right? We didn't get our own venue. And because of that, we were in control of 0 of the audio, 0 of the layout of the spaces, and really none of the production value. And that had some great benefits to it in that we were able to really focus on content and programming. And then it, of course, had these drawbacks where it's like we had no control over AV and video uploads. But ultimately, I had a lot of fun. It was a really good event in my eyes. I don't know if anyone else who wants to share sort of their thoughts of what DeSci Denver was like and what it might have done for the space.
I'll just jump in and say that as someone who is very new to this space, it was very cool. It was definitely a whirlwind. I learned so much and was very inspired, and took a while to process and put back together in a logical way what I had just learned and experienced. But it was very cool to meet like a whole world of people that are very passionate about the same things that I am, that are kind of coming at this from a different angle.
Yeah, have you had like that post-processing time yet to unpack and sort of think about where you plug into the space and stuff like that?
I think so. I think I people will be like, well, what did you do? And I feel like after telling many people and putting it into words, I think I was, able to like finally wrap my head around what had happened and what was going on. And I'm talking to a handful of people in the space now about doing some events here at Stanford, to kind of hopefully bring DeSci to the more forefront of academic ongoings.
That's awesome. That's so great. I'm so glad. Yeah, I know your fireside with Shadi in particular is something that just pops into my mind randomly throughout a day. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that actually happened to you. Like there's stuff you shared that the people who are not in the scientific realm are like, I have no idea that's kind of the goings on that happens in academia. So it was very eye-opening.
It was very fun, and it was also weird. I feel like I had a bit of an epiphany. I don't know if I think Shadi like phrased this like he was like, you should come to Denver, you should come do this. And I was like, I don't know what you do, dude. I don't know what DeSci is. And he was like, no, you're perfect for this. And I was like, I seriously have no idea what's going on. And he pulled me onto a stage for 45 minutes in front of tons of people. And I mean, if I were at least giving a presentation on my own research or something, I would feel like totally okay because I know what I was doing. And I'm okay with being on stage, but not when I have no idea what's going on. And it took a lot of trust there. And I think he executed that beautifully in terms of like leading me through my experiences and how DeSci could kind of fit in with my daily ongoings, with my world,
For sure. It was a lot of fun to watch. I'm glad you also got stuff out of it too. It wasn't just one-sided. Do have Ariella, you just popped in. Feel free to introduce yourself if you want. We're doing a little bit of news from the past month. We're probably just wrapping up a discussion on DeSci Denver.
Yeah, is it working? I've never used this platform before. I'm literally in lab, just like in the cell culture room. So
awesome.
Going to be really intermittently able to speak. Just wanted to be able to listen, but I was curious about the platform. Yeah, for those who don't know me, I'm Ariella. I'm an MD Ph.D. student at WashU. That's where I am right now. And I also founded Web3 Women in Science. And I don't know. I feel like that's it. That's me. I think I know pretty much everyone here. So yeah.
Yeah, and another person to have actually met in Denver. It's one of the best things about these friggin' events is everyone who, first of all, yes, they're exclusionary by nature. Like lots of people cannot come, but for those of us who can make it out there, it's very nice to like finally put a face to a name. It's fantastic. Anyone else want to share? Jelani, we'll give a second for your internet to catch up if you want to share your experience from Denver. I cannot hear you. Okay.
Sorry.
There it is.
To me, the biggest takeaway from Denver, was that it's surprising how much of a different culturally DeSci is from the other niches in Web3. Lindsay, you're new, so you've only kind of seen us. But if you spent any time at Shelling Point on the first, you can see how much it's very different. The overarching culture in Web3 is very different from DeSci. And I think we need to figure out a way of, and Lindsay is actually doing this, how do we somewhat detach ourselves from only appearing as a part of like the Ethereum cohort or the Web3 cohort, and how do we participate more in these traditional science or these legacy science conferences? we have our own. So DeSci Road is doing their own version of that coming soon. But I think John and Shadi have done a good job, and I think moving forward, we have these often opportunities where we can start to explore these. Right, I would like to see DeSci as an extension of major scientific conferences in the future population that we're looking to target, and I don't think scientists are going to unicorn onesies on the first floor to come and participate in this kind of overarching talk of new technologies that are going to really impact their day-to-day. So Ariella, yeah, go ahead. You don't have to raise your hand, just jump in. This is an open conversation.
No, I wanted to raise my hand. I didn't want to interrupt you. Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, to be honest, I do have a rainbow unicorn onesie and I would be willing to wear it, but I agree that most people wouldn't. And I was going to say, like, I think I brought this up in another conversation recently. Remember when I was moderating that talk and then I asked the audience or the panelists, like, is blockchain necessary for DeSci? Is blockchain sufficient for DeSci? And everyone was like, no. And then I was like, then why are we at ETH Denver? Like, why are we not doing this conference, you know, as an adjunct to an open science conference or something? If we all just agreed that projects don't necessarily need to have a Web3 crypto DAO component to be part of DeSci, and also that just because a project does have both science and blockchain, crypto, Web3 in it, it's not necessarily decentralized science. Like, why are we here? Is sort of, I think, a fun topic of conversation to consider.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we talked about this a little bit in the last episode with DeSci London, where the space is just starting to branch out of that, like, crypto degenerate space, where, yes, there's awesome stuff there. They're building really cool tools, decentralized infrastructure, all that stuff. And some of it will be used for DeSci, but we're starting to find real use cases and real researchers who want to use what we say we can build. So it's like, it's totally time to, like, maybe step away a little bit from blockchain and go into the open science communities. Lindsay, I think you put out when at Shelling Point a call to action for the space to go to these scientific conferences and, like, listen to them, and we should be uncomfortable in that world and just try to find common language and how we can build together. And it's really cool to watch this, like, narrative of, hey, focus on the science more than the crypto evolve over the past several months in the space.
Well, I think what it does is really we need to move kind of in the midway point, right? So we have examples of, like, Ghosh here, which is its own dedicated blockchain that is contributing to the ethos of open science and decentralized science, right? And we probably won't have a lot of time to touch upon this, but we also have DeSci DAOs launching governance tokens. And John, I know you and I had a really great conversation about this topic in a hot tub just before I left Denver. But that's still a component, right? So I think crypto will always be, or at least blockchain technology, distributed ledger technology is always going to be a component of DeSci, and it's not necessarily one or the other. And I think, as we said in our DEET or not to DEET, it's a spectrum. And so I'd still love us to appear at these Web3 conferences and show them that there's actual use case at the end of this technology that is used for currency right now, but also incorporate some of these other participants that are traditional scientists and, like, hey, it can be degen, it can have all this funky stuff, and culturally it's very important, but it also has terminal use case, and this is how it actually works.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. There's it brings in the two other news topics we wanted to talk about this week too. So there's the HairDAO token launch, which is an example of a DAO launching a governance token. HairDAO, for those who don't know, is using DAO infrastructure essentially to fund hair loss research, and it's very interesting. They got great memes. Go check them out. And they just launched their governance token. The sale went great. I think they targeted $50,000 and they got $200 and some odd thousand, which speaks a lot to the organization they've got going there in the community. And then on the other side, we had the DeSci Labs beta release, and DeSci Labs has no token and does not have plans to release a token. It's very much using Web3 just as an infrastructure tool to build, like, an open state repository, and both should and do exist and should continue to exist. And it's like marrying those two concepts. One is money in a governance way, and the other is, hey, here's a tool that's going to help us build open science principles into the scientific stack. So it's really cool. Ariella, go.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I want to clarify. I didn't mean like Web3 shouldn't be a part of DeSci. It was more like the fact that we were doing this as a subsection of ETH Denver means that you were kind of only going to get people who were in it for the crypto component. And so I was questioning whether we should be having that be the central focus, like whether like nobody's going to show up to ETH Denver if they're like not into crypto at all, except I guess maybe Lindsay, like except if like someone drags you there, right? Or like I dragged Al there, like that'll happen. But I'm saying like you could still have a DeSci conference as an adjunct to an open science conference and talk about the DAOs and talk about the token launches, you know, or you could still like do presentations at ETH Denver, like send scientists, you know, from the DeSci section. If your goal is really just to educate all the crypto enthusiasts about DeSci, then like, great, go sign up for a stage at ETH Denver and tell them all about it. But to have ETH Denver be the place that all the builders in DeSci gather to talk to each other, I feel like is sending the wrong message.
Go for it, Lindsay.
Yeah, I totally want to jump off this point because I think it's awesome. And this kind of comes back to the same thing that I said on the panel at Shelling Point, which was like, you guys have like an awesome platform and awesome technologies and values and they can be used, but I feel like your audience doesn't know about it. And I think that we got to bring this to like science conferences. And to me, I'm a neuroscientist. So the thing when I think of is SFN, Society for Neuroscience, which is like a 30,000 person conference, happens every November. I'm sure there's other conferences too. That's just the big one that I know about. And that and like there's also like SACNAS or Abercams, like these kind of how to increase accessibility in science conferences. That's like the theme of those ones. So this kind of like maybe not divide and conquer, but just like tackle it from multiple angles so that people know that this exists. Because I think if people understand what it is, I think that they would be very, very interested in it.
Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway from the event. I also like it was one of the coolest things that happened to me at Denver was people who were crypto, just purely crypto, coming up and be like, "Oh, DeSci, this is really cool. This is like a legitimate use case for blockchain. How neat! I'm gonna go home and learn more about it." It's like, "Oh, great! Come help us build this stuff, please." So
yeah,
hopefully we'll get more of that too. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a hunger for utility in the wider Web3 space. And I think it's just the awareness thing. Once people start to be aware and start realizing that all my like curious questions or low level scientific questions I can actually put these to people who are trained professionals or participate in the science and all this kind of stuff, I think the floodgates will eventually open. It'll probably be spearheaded by things like tokens and some of the more degen stuff. Until we start to make a real presence in these traditional conferences, but it's gonna come. It's almost
I think
like a flood gate.
Is he skipping for anyone, or is it just me? He's skipping. Okay, so I think he's saying it's almost inevitable that we're going to open the floodgates to people coming into DeSci, and he's very excited for that. And Jelani, if that's exactly what you said, you owe me like $5 or something.
I didn't hear what you said, but yeah, I'm sure something good.
I don't know what's going on. It's got to be your internet. Maybe Canada is falling into the ocean. Yeah.
That sounds right.
So that said, I mean, is there any other news from the past month that anyone wants to talk about before we jump into exploring how, as we build this ecosystem that we're hoping it brings in a lot of people, we bring people in with the mindset of diversity, equity, and inclusion as we move forward. But before we get into that, any other news from February that like people are very excited about from the DeSci space? I'll plug one more time the beta launch at Labs, because this is a really cool thing. Disclaimer, I'm on the Labs team, but it was, you can go to nodes.dsci.com and test it out. Just play with the platform. You can upload if you're a researcher and you have manuscript, or you just love reading research for some reason, you can upload it, you can annotate, you can add the code and all the data and all the different components directly there into a research object and share it. And we're really looking for feedback on how we can make this better for researchers in particular. So if you do use it and you're like, I would use this, I'm not going to use this, I would use this if, let us know the if. There's a little feedback button in the bottom right corner of the platform. Just let us know what you think we should add to it, and we will definitely prioritize the feedback that we get from people who would use this in their everyday work. But if there's nothing else, we can... Renee, Lindsay, and Tammy, do you care if other people stay around on stream for the DEI conversation? Or cool, then we'll just continue with like an open conversation on DEI in the space. I don't think I am in a position to introduce the concept, so I would love if someone else who has a little more experience here is willing to introduce what DEI is and why it's so important in DeSci and what we're trying to build.
And I know, John, that you think that that's a simple question.
I'm hoping.
That's loaded, and I don't know, how best to address this, because I think each term within that DEI has weight, right? And we have to explain how each is connected. And so I think that. And maybe it's the educator and me going back. Let's get on a common ground with terminology and what it is. And so when I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, one, it's becoming such a buzz that I think people are using it and not necessarily implementing it. And we've got to be very careful about that. Diversity is just valuing differences. Is actually, we always say diversity is a fact. We're a diverse group of people. Inclusion is the action. And then belonging is the feeling. Because even though we say DEI, we also have belonging and access that are a part of that. We also have to talk about justice, because justice is the systems that are perpetuating these inequities. And so all of these terms are there and a part of this space. And then there's equity that people don't understand. And equity comes before any of these terms can even be addressed. You've got to get there, but people are still stuck on equality. And I've been seeing it because of the equal pay that's been going around. People, it's civil rights movement, things like that. It was all about equality. That was one step, but that's not enough. Equality means we all get the same thing, but we may not need the same thing. Whereas equity, I get what I need, right? I have access to those resources. I get the resources and the things that I need. You get what you need. And that's a different level than just everybody getting something. And so I think that when we're talking about this and we're talking about what is it, it's a lot. But I will pause there and let others give their input. But I think when we're talking about this, that's why I have my Be a JEDI workshop that I do. And that's belonging, access, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So it doesn't just limit it to diversity, equity, and inclusion. But if you're going to start this work, you've got to start with equity. And then you can address some of the other things that are part of that acronym. I'll pause.
That was great. Yeah, I imagine I don't have nearly enough knowledge on it to fully comprehend what it is. From my perspective, the desire and the goal is to incorporate it into. So here's the bigger vision, I guess. So we're using these Web3 stuff, this Web3 tooling, to really rebuild new systems from the ground up. We have the opportunity to intentionally build every structure and mechanism within a system, instead of having like a system evolve over decades and centuries of kind of like happy accidents and sometimes unhappy accidents and just like random stuff that happened. So when we're building these tools with intention, I think the people building the infrastructure need to have this knowledge in mind, and I think so that we can inject equity into the root of the system. And I think, and fully willing to admit this, I think myself included, a lot of other builders in the space don't have this knowledge. We're not taught it at all. So it's very important to have the conversations and have people who do have the knowledge, who are willing to share it with those who are willing to listen. And I think from our end, it's just people need to listen and not push back to
Well, and I think that, going to the previous conversation and then linking it to what we're talking about now, I think some of the things that, those of us who are here that mentioned it about that exactly, just in going to East Denver and doing the Shelling Point event and all of that, is knowing your audience and making sure that you tailor what you're saying to that audience. Like, I think because science is so vast and it's so and it can be so specialized depending on where you are, that I think we get stuck thinking about it in just how we use it and what we do, when really there are so many people who are exposed to what you do and what you're going to say, especially if it's something like a speaking event. And so I think that was in itself a highlight of the necessity to consider all these things that we're talking about today. Because you got to think people in the audience were like myself, non-technical, academic, but, I play in tech, not necessarily the science aspect, but for STEM, if you think about STEM, I play there, right? And I'm one of those unconventional scientists, right? A research scientist, right? It's one that research and do that, because there's different types, right? We're not just medical doctors, we're not just MDs, we have PhDs, and we have different fields and industries. And I think that not just thinking about it, the cryptocurrency people, but being there, but also those who may use it differently. There may have been educators there that teach science in a different way, whether it's at the secondary level, or grade school level versus higher education, that just don't necessarily work. And then those that deal more front lines, what I call front lines, patient care, right? I think that some of those things, or have client care where they actually deal with people and not just things, and creating and formulating the tools. And so I think that when we're thinking about this, we got to think about that as well. Like, who's our audience and what is our message? What is our stance? Are we just going to be so niche in our space when we're talking about science and decentralized science? Or are we going to be more inclusive in that? And how do we bring other people in to either understand what we do to make it so that is open? Because you can open it, but if nobody understands it, no one is going to access it. So then that makes accessibility an issue. So I'll hush. Lindsay's nodding, so somebody else may have something to say.
I think what you said was fantastic. Yeah, I think the summary and the efforts in the DEI, that all chalks up to my kind of view of it as well. I think I don't know too much about, again, this Web3 space, and I'm new to the DeSci community. I'm sure there's DEI efforts that could be done there, but I just see a lot of potential for using DeSci to kind of break down the walls and increasing that accessibility to science, to education. And I just agree with you. That's all I'm saying.
No, it's okay. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just knew that somebody else may have something else to say, because I just think that this area is fascinating to me. And so that's why I'm here. I'm kind of like you, Lindsay. I've now Web3 I play, and I know that there has been a shift. And I know we keep talking about the cryptocurrency people. It was the East Denver, but it was really more of a Web3, even though it's titled East Denver, because I've been in this space for years. And I've been on that end of it and not necessarily the DeSci part of it. And I think that when you understand Web3 and blockchain technology and cryptocurrency and those shifts and the history of it, then I think you can better position the decentralized science. Because I think initially it was a cryptocurrency thing and people were in that. But I think if you really think about what the topics were and what people were talking about at this particular conference, this year, even though it was titled ETH Denver, which is a cryptocurrency or a blockchain slash cryptocurrency. That's one thing, but I think that the conversations and the things that I attended and paid attention to, so I will be saying I'm limited because there was so much going on, that it was more of a Web3 conversation. And it has shifted from how can I flip and make money and trade to what is the utility. And I think we've mentioned that, like how it best is used. And so when people are trying to figure out DeSci, they're trying to figure out, how does this apply to me? How can I use it? How can it be used to help me in some way, whether I'm directly using it or the people that I typically would go to, a doctor or someone, how can they use it to best improve my care or whatever, however I'm engaging in it. My medical exams. Oh my goodness, I've seen an amazing thing with an MRI machine. But anyway, things like that. I think that's what we're moving to. So these conversations to include people and bring people in from the margins is, you got to think that, you know, we're already talking about the percentage of women in STEM. Just think about how many people in the population are and how they understand that. They probably had it in high school when they were forced to do it, and that was it, right? So to bring these people in who were at this larger conference, I think it's about, you know, making the conversation in a way that, yes, you speak to the people who are part of your community, the science community, but you also speak to those, like, this is what it looks like for you. This is how it would apply and affect you wherever you are in general.
That's interesting, because my understanding is that the scientific community is also fairly homogenous and has a lot of work to do on its own. So when we're building this DeSci community, you're saying maybe we build it as what we think it should be, what science should be, completely inclusive, and just show people in the legacy system and the new system what it just looks like.
Oh, absolutely. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that we also have to, like you say, you got to just be mindful of, like, being inclusive. And I think it should be from your point of view, but it's up to you to also make others and help, not wrong word. I didn't say make. Help others understand it. Help others understand.
We'll hold them down, damn it.
That's probably my internal beliefs coming out, but help others understand.
Sure. Lindsay, I see you trying to jump in. Go for it.
I just wanted to say, like everything should try to be inclusive, right? Like it's not like it's just academia with problems. I mean, academia has a lot of problems, but you know, everything should strive for this period. I think what's cool about DeSci is that it's so new, right? It's like academia, like where the heck did it start, right? You know, like centuries ago. When did academic institution, like, it's so old and it's messy, but like here it feels like almost like a definitive start of something new. So let's shape it properly from the beginning. I think there's a lot of like power in that.
There is.
Absolutely.
There definitely is. Oksana wanted to say something though.
I wanted to add something. I think that Web3 and DeSci, it's not necessarily about crypto, of course, but it's more closer to infrastructures that are harder to do hierarchic, or in our world, it's some kind of infrastructure that easier to execute shared ownership within the DAO, within the community, and this shared ownership is easier than hierarchy. So it's a way of new thinking in science, especially because it's very hierarchic direction, it's very hierarchic area, field. And of course, it's evolutionary thinking about evolutionary mindset about how can we own in shared manner and with rewarding crypto, not crypto, doesn't matter, with shared ownership and shared opportunity to give feedback and evaluate as a DAO, not as a individual peer reviewer. It's very important, I think.
I think that's fundamentally what is the crux in terms of making it more equitable. But I think to Tammy's point is so you have that once you have participants in the space. And the problem is how do we get those participants into the space, right? And Ariella and I have had this conversation, and I believe Renee and I have touched upon this. We're kind of, and I think this is a great representation of diversity, right? Just this panel of participants speaking here. But we are, by definition, as the quote unquote minorities or those who are underrepresented, we're behind those who have the opportunity or the privilege or the bandwidth to kind of jump into these new ecosystems more because they're ahead of the game, right? So I'm not going to call out any particular groups. Ariella does that really well. And I'll give her the opportunity to do that if she wants to. But there's a group of participants, there's a particular demographic that always has a head start on other people. And you see that in DeSci, right? It is very homogenous. There is a group of participants that are ahead of the game. And so how do we as individuals tailor our messaging to get more of who we represent or who we want to represent or what have you into the space? And I'd love to kind of go around this room here and get the impression of what you think the messaging is needed to bring in the group that you're interested in into the space. Tammy, you're very eloquent with how you talk, so I'll let you start that off.
I wanted to hear other responses first. So
that's fine. You know, no, wait. Renee has not spoken, so Renee, actually, I'll let you start too, if you want to go with that. Who would you like to see more in this space, or what would you like to see more of, and how do you think the message needs to be tailored to that particular group of participants?
Yeah. So I think my perspective on DEI has gotten progressively more cynical over the last 18 months. I have spent a shit ton of my time building community for inclusive people and being inclusive. And I don't know, I feel like my efforts have been kind of fruitless. So I just have to underscore out of everything that Tammy said, which was wonderful, by the way. I think it's all about being inclusive because that's like the actionable behavior. So like if you're in this space and you say you support DEI, you have an obligation to help people get a seat at the table. You know, I have probably gotten hundreds of DMs across different socials on people wanting to help me. I can count on one hand the number of white guys that have helped me get a seat at the table in Web3. So like that to me is like a problem. I guess to answer your actual question, I would like to see more queer people in this space. I feel very isolated within Web3 as kind of who I am. And I don't really know how to do that because at least with, you know, I'm trying to have outreach on social. A lot of people in the LGBT community are actually very resistant to crypto. And it's like not a thing for them, which is disappointing because I think it's like actually a really great way to mobilize. So how I've been approaching it's actually very different. Most of my sort of networking and social has always been from like a very global, digitally native perspective. I've actually been focused on local, real world, physical events, getting plugged in with local communities here in Florida, attending different Pride events, and I've been actually starting to do workshops and just helping people get a wallet, sign up, and get interested. And it feels very tedious and burdensome, but it seems to be way more impactful. And it's also more tangible. So I think that's what I would like to see DeSci do more is like we need to actually have boots on the ground, onboarding at our local community level. You know, when I go to these conferences, you see the same people over and over again. And like it's kind of an echo chamber where like there's nobody at this call right now who disagrees with anything anyone's saying. And that's great. But also like, you know, we're already here. So I think like my call to action is like get involved with local communities, help onboard people, and like realize that your online presence can only go so far.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. That's true. I think, you know, that people overlook, because we're very much Web3 focused, or Web3 is very online focused, but people overlook the impact of in-person conversation, right? And the need for in-person representation. I can speak about it, John and I spoke about it just earlier in terms of how impactful it was to meet all of you, or the vast majority of you, in person. Despite having spoken with you for months on end, there's a different level of connection and communication that can get across in terms of making people feel more comfortable, right? I hope now that anybody who's met me since then can feel that they can reach out and talk about anything with me, and we can collaborate. It's a warm feeling of bringing participants into the space. And so I very much agree with that. I wonder, and Renee's specific question to you. So you say that the LGBTQ2+ and queer community is resistant to crypto. Are they as well resistant to the scientific realm? Because I think the inclusion of participants into DeSci leans more towards getting them into science than it is necessarily getting them into crypto.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. From my experience, there's a lot of queer artists who feel very upset that there's a lot of situations where art gets minted on the blockchain that really shouldn't have been there. It was either stolen or some sort of copy derivative. And as soon as they find out about DeSci having any sort of relation to crypto, they almost always go to, well, NFTs are a scam. I don't like that people's art is being stolen. I don't like AI generated art. And I've had a really difficult time trying to get away from that narrative. So I don't really know how to fix it. So far, my approach has been, hey, I do fundraising for nonprofits, and I would love to help your nonprofit get money. And well, by the way, we just happen to use a crypto platform. And that seems to be the best way to do it, because if you're kind of like, hey, I want to help you do what you're already doing and get you money for it, that seems to be like, okay, I'll hear you out and see what this DeSci thing is.
Lindsay, I saw you wanted to jump in. Go ahead.
I just totally agree with that. I think that DeSci, at least from my perspective, should be framed as DeSci, as science, as decentralized science. I don't think it should be framed as Web3 or crypto or ETH Denver, really, because like it just adds labels that are kind of like inherently exclusionary, or like things that people don't want to deal with. Like, it's science. We're talking about accessible science, decentralized science. That's what it is. Call it that. And I think that would really help. Like, just the framing of what this whole thing is would help increase accessibility, period.
I agree with you. I think we've kind of spun out of the ETH Denver was more or less the advent of what DeSci is now. And so we've kind of taken on this brunt of Web3, crypto, and even to a certain extent, DeFi. DeFi culture has been a part of the beginnings of what DeSci is. But I think as we mature, we're going to end up moving further and further and further away from that. And I think for the benefit of ourselves and for our mission, it's just something that's bound to happen as we bring in more participants.
I have a question that I think also ties into sort of the bringing in more diversity into the space and giving people more of a voice and being more inclusive. How much should we focus on teaching the current Web3 sector, like the people that Renee's talking about, that, hey, no, there is that here, but these are also very powerful tools for coordination and infrastructure building? And how much should we focus on just bringing in new people who have never experienced Web3 and making DeSci their first experience?
Can I jump in for a sec? I think that question is almost tangential to what was just said, because like the idea is kind of like we can be having DeSci without onboarding people to crypto. Like, we can also onboard people to crypto if they like specifically want to join a DAO, but maybe for like phase 1 DeSci, we can just not be telling people they need a crypto wallet, because like, honestly, to participate in how many projects right now that are DeSci, do you need a crypto wallet? Like, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So I think like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm interpreting what was said incorrectly, but I think that's sort of like.
No, I probably communicated it incorrectly. So
Okay.
There's those people we can target. Just bring them into the DeSci movement. There is no crypto involved, but there's also the crypto environment we can target and bring them out of sort of the depths of Web3 that they live in and say, here's a real utility experience this for what it is and not because it's Web3?
I think that's what we've kind of been doing with only having our conferences at crypto conferences and trying to tell all the crypto people like science is a thing. And that's great. I mean, I personally think we should tell as many people as possible on the planet that science is a thing and that it's cool. But I also feel like it is more and more shifting the demographics of the movement towards like non-science, like science enthusiasts, or like, I really love hanging out with science enthusiasts. I just question the wisdom of building scientific protocols that are like made by and for science enthusiasts without like traditionally trained scientists anywhere in the midst. I'm not saying that good things couldn't be built. I'm just saying in all likelihood, things would be built that traditionally trained scientists wouldn't want to engage in. And then we're going to like keep creating this split of like, we have a separate DeSci world that is just like not communicating with the traditional scientist world, you know? That might have been really hard to explain. Anyway, I think that we should be focusing a lot more than we are on scientists. And an earlier question was like, basically, are there queer scientists? Like, is science also, you know, like homophobic and transphobic? And I think everyone knows like, yeah, pretty much everything is a little bit homophobic and transphobic, including science. But I do personally know tons of queer scientists, including myself. Like I'm at university and we have all the clubs. We have like LGBTQ med. We have like outgrads, which is like LGBTQ grad students. Like it would take me 2 seconds to like go to one of those clubs and be like, let me give you a presentation on decentralized science. And then just like, boom, immediately 50 queer scientists onboarded to DeSci, you know? So I think we could definitely do that. There's not like a scarcity of them. And I will turn back over the mic.
Yeah, I think, but I can't speak to the queer experience in science. I imagine that it's a little bit different because it's not as much of an overt, like visually delineating characteristic. Like anybody can be queer, anybody can be thing, right? So I don't know if the level of discrimination is the same unless you're very like you're out and you're like claiming it and it's not the right word. You are overtly standing that with the flag, right? If you can be deep cover, you can be all these kind of things. I don't know if this level of discrimination is the same. I'm sure it's there, which is why my question originally was what was the queer experience as it relates to science, being that it's not visually overt in the same way.
I think it definitely can be overt. Like if you're looking at me, I understand why you would think it's not, because exactly. I don't immediately read as queer, and and like that's pretty standard for like femme presenting by women. And I mean, occasionally I do walk around wearing rainbows, but I would say I know for a fact the experience is different for like my trans comrades here, you know. Also, I do have a lot of just like gay male friends who, for whatever reason, you immediately know, like they are not pretending to be straight, not that they would want to, but like it is very obvious. So I think that, yeah, if you're looking at me, it might not be readily apparent, but there are definitely a lot of people where the radar is beep, 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 beeping right away.
So to bring this back to the true original question, which was like, what are the types, the people we want to bring to the space, and how do we bring them in? So Ariella, what I heard from you is like, or how should our messaging be? What I heard from you is our messaging should include Web3 people, but that should probably not be the focus. The focus should be bringing new people into this world of open science that uses new tools, not necessarily Web3 tooling, but just new stuff. And the rationale behind that is there's just more diversity outside of Web3 than within it. So we have more potential to bring in more people of different backgrounds and experiences if we message DeSci outside of Web3.
I think that's true. I think that what I was saying was just more that like we've been doing like both both things are valid, and I think we've already been doing the heavily target the crypto community thing, and like we need to do more of the other thing now. But I also think what you brought up is valid, which is crypto, I think, is inherently not a very diverse space, and if we just keep targeting it willy-nilly, it's going to continuously increase the non-diversity of our group.
Interesting. I'm curious if anyone else has any other takes on how we can build DeSci messaging to be inclusive and to get more diverse perspectives and backgrounds into it, as Lindsay, as you brought up, as we just build this brand new thing that just feels like we have a blank slate and do whatever we want.
Tammy, we let you go last, so or relatively last. I'd love to hear your perspective in terms of the groups that you think need to come in and how that messaging needs to be tailored to that particular group.
Also, Lindsay, if you go ahead, yeah.
So I don't know how to really phrase this, and I've been trying to like figure it out from the beginning of this kind of section, which is like, I'm not sure that like targeting a specific group like is the right tactic or the right way to do it. I think like the idea of going to talk and connect with people in person, like Renee was saying, or like going to groups on campus, like Ariella was saying, but whether those groups are LGBTQIA or Indigenous identifying people or whatever, like I don't think it matters what the group is, just that these efforts need to be made for all the groups. Maybe I am totally off base here as a white woman, but that's just kind of my thought is like, or maybe I misinterpreted the question as like, how do we best get these groups in? I don't think we should do it by group. I think we just need
to involve.
Period.
Right. So I disagree. And that's why I put that question in. So I think exactly the question that I asked implied the need for that. And the reason that I feel that it is everybody has different criteria that they need to feel whole. Right. So it's kind of the same thing, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion. It's like the same thing as I don't see color as the example, right? You need to see a person as their individual to be able to address what their selective issues are in terms of coming in. So I don't think the messaging for, let's say, and even within the spectrum of queer, the messaging is going to be different for the different parts of that. The messaging is going to be different for a woman coming in versus a man coming in, or a cis woman versus a gay man, or a black person versus a white person. Everybody needs to have their own selective cultural, I guess, belonging or cognition to make them feel like they're at home in this space. And therefore, I believe that the messaging does have to be slightly different. It could be overall the same thing because we all want people in. So that's the like base layer.
So this is great. So we have some disagreement. There's some like conversation there, right? So how? Like what is it, like, other than saying like this is a brand new slate, we can do this together, let's bring people in. And especially this gets a little difficult when you start talking about intersectionality, right? Okay. So how?
Yeah, so the way I think about it is we're thinking about primary characteristics, right? And when we're talking about diversity, and what you just brought up is what I was going to bring up, is this thought of intersectionality, because we also have class, we also have educational levels, and we have all of that. And we know that those who are, well, you know, those that, look, now this is my bias coming in, that are typically in the science realm and who we consider scientists have an advanced degree. And so therefore, we also have those things to think about. And so I'm always thinking about it from the point of, one, intention and being intentional. So representation. So it's not necessarily, I'm going to target this group. Is if you're given a message, if you are speaking and doing all that, do you have someone from that community represented on your team? And when I'll just say team to be a blanket term, because it depends on if it's a panel or whatever, right? So I'll just say team as a blanket term. Do you have someone represented? If not, if it's homogeneous, then that's a problem, because I think representation and then accessibility, affordability, like all of those things has to be accounted for. And these are not necessarily saying I'm going to talk to Black people. It's more of, is there a Black person represented? And I'm using Black because that's how I identify. And so I'll just put that out there as an example. But it's not necessarily that. It's just that, do we have someone represented, and do we have someone that our community, whoever we're talking to, can identify with? And I think it's all about purpose and making sure it's in alignment. So I think what Renee said earlier is it. How is it connected to what I'm doing and where I'm going, my goals? And whether it's my industry, whether it's, my positioning in the science, because science is so vast and we're using it as a general term, but there's so many aspects of it, anyway. But so I would just come from that point of view, right? And look and see, if I'm talking to and you were talking about conferences, Lindsay, earlier. If you're going to a particular conference, how do I tailor this? One, how I make sure that diversity, which is a fact, is represented? And then what is my action? How can I be inclusive? How can I, if I'm taking up this space, how can I make space for others? How can I bring them in from the margins? And I think that's it. It's more in what Renee was saying earlier, and kind of hung on to my thing about action. It's about what is that action, and making sure that there's utility for me, and I am represented when you start talking to me. Because if I'm not represented, then I don't necessarily see a space for me to go and play, quote unquote play.
Totally. Can I so is it about I'm going to say this and is it about advancing the agenda of an agenda makes it seem like a negative connotation. I'm not trying to make it a negative connotation, but is it about how to pitch it to people to advance the agenda of that underrepresented group? Is that kind of what? Or representation in general?
Yeah, I think this goes to, so Jelani's question and his implication is it also implies that there's a singular voice of the DeSci space. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think if we're trying to build a space that's representative of the world we live in, and gives people what they need, as you were describing what equity is earlier, Tammy, then it's about giving people first that representation that you just mentioned, and giving people the resources and the empowerment to go out and talk to their own communities. So they feel like if they want to go talk to their specific group, they can, and they'll have the support of the larger group when they come back. And it also, I think I completely agree with you. It's about giving up your space. If you have the platform already, make space for someone else. And I'm starting to see that happen more and more throughout the DeSci ecosystem, and it's really cool to see. But I also line with Lindsay and Tammy here that it's more, it's less targeting and more about empowering people to target as an individual whoever they want to target. So those are my thoughts on this. Ariella, I know you're taking notes back there. You go, and then we'll go back around. So if anyone wants to chat, throw it in the private chat. We'll go in order.
She is she's itching. She's ready.
Yeah. So. I'm trying so hard not to talk too much. I just get excited. So I'm like, oh, I'll wait. And I'm just writing everything down.
Ariella, that's not a thing to talk too much when you're
I don't know. I get told that. I guess mostly by men though. So, there's that. But anyway, I agree with what you were saying, actually. Representation matters, of course. I think Jelani and I can both speak about our experiences of when you're invited to work in a DAO, and then the DAO core team is just 12 out of 12 white dudes. And you're I wonder if this is going to be a positive experience for me. Let's find out, so there's that happens. Representation definitely matters. And it says a lot about the values of the organization. But I also wanted to bring up, in terms of messaging, I feel like we were touching on that, what is the messaging that you're putting out as your organization? And I wanted to bring up this one example that from a study. that was looking at when you are recruiting people, especially to a field or a role that might be perceived as traditionally for one group, like let's say men, for example. So this specific study was made a coding 101 class, like where coding and programming is typically seen as like a male thing. And when they called the class like coding 101, you know, for men, it's like, yeah, men showed up. If you call it coding 101 for women, then tons of women showed up. When you just call it coding 101, just men. And, you know, this is because when we're trained that when we see something like that, our eyes might scroll past, and automatically, because of, you know, like just society and your brain, you might be like, that's not really for me. You might like, I might not even read that. And like, that's why I specifically called my organization this name that is very hard for people to say and annoys people, but is very direct. It's called Web3 Women in Science. And it's just supposed to be like, you can make absolutely no mistake. Like if you are a woman in science, then don't scroll past this because it has your group right in it. Like it's calling you, like it's basically calling your name. White cishet men think everything's calling their name. They don't have this problem. Everything's for me. But everybody else, sometimes you need to say, like, you need to put their name in it. And it's not going to be like Ariella, Renee, but it's going to be like, oh, for queer women. And then we'll be like, what did you call me? Is that for me? So, you know, that's where messaging comes in. And then the last thing that I really wanted to bring up is the concept of affirmative action. Like the regular corporate world and academia has figured this out, that you need to have things like quotas and grants if you just do the bare minimum of being like, we at our institution are not overtly racist or misogynist and all are welcome to apply. Like that doesn't do anything. Like we know that, like that doesn't work. You're still going to end up with very little diversity. So my definition of ally is not just like be friendly and don't hate on people. My definition of ally is a higher bar. You have to actually do something. So like proactively. So if you're hosting a conference, stop spending all your money flying in, you know, straight white het dudes. Like just don't. Like just make your travel grants for underrepresented groups. If you have a problem reaching your quota, boom, easy. Give all the money to people that aren't represented, then they will come, you know, and start implementing quotas. Like if you have a panel and you realize that there are 4 white dudes on your panel, then if somebody else has to join the panel and they're white dudes, say no. Like this is how it has to happen. And people don't like that. And they think it's like anti-meritocratic, but it's not. It's really not. And all the data shows it's not. And I'm not going to rehash all the data on the call. It's just not really the point. Just like read a book. Like everybody, if you read the books in the studies, you know that like affirmative action works and it doesn't give you a bunch of unqualified people. So yeah, I'm going to stop ranting now.
I think that was a great rant. Lindsay, please go.
So I feel like I am not saying the right things. I absolutely think there should be targeted groups. There should be communities. How you sell this idea of DeSci, I guess I'm confused why that would be different in the general sense. Maybe
No, I think no. So well, at least to me, it's not. I think there's a difference between selling DeSci as a concept and also selling it as like a sub concept, saying that look, this is your opportunity to level the playing field by coming into this brand new space and making it such that you have as much power as anybody else, and to kind of tip the paradigm where it's more equal.
Okay.
Right. So those are 2 different messages. So there is just the overarching message of DeSci is great, or DeSci can potentially be great. And it needs a in my opinion, needs a sub-messaging structure that also appeals to the inclusiveness of getting underrepresented groups in it. It's not just one gigantic blanket statement. I think within each DAO, just like within traditional organizations, you should have different bodies of people in terms of PR, in terms targeting different things. So in my perspective of a structure of a DeSci organization, it would be the messaging of DeSci, and then everything else that falls into making sure that you get as many particular people around as well. So you tailor that larger message to individual folks. So I think I don't know if that's maybe where it breaks down, but there's an overarching message of DeSci specific to DeSci, and then there's the other messaging of DeSci is great for underrepresented participants because it gives them the ability to feel or to be included into something.
I agree with that.
Right.
And I also think that while we're talking about messaging, we've got to be careful, because I think what has happened in the general Web3 world is that some of that targeting has now become this just marketing.
Commoditized.
Right? Because we're going to say women in Web3, right? We're going to throw all these terms around, and then you go to, or it's a women event, and then you go there and the percentages are off. The representation is off. I'm trying to say this politically correct, but it's still something wrong because they just used it to market. So I think, we've got to also be careful that it doesn't take on that, what is happening in the Web3 space. So I just want to put it in there.
Exactly to that point,
I so much agree with that.
Yeah. So that's good heart law. So that's good heart's law, right? Where it became a target to be diverse, became a target and becomes a marketing ploy. Now that actually segues me into, so messaging is very important. I think we can go on and on and on. We're going to have this conversation again in a different opportunity, but just to push it forward, messaging is very important, but we see that there are actually a variety of Web3 entities and organizations that are pushing diversity of its many forms, right? And yet we're still stuck with this issue of not having the representation that I think we're looking to have. So why is that? So just for a disclaimer, I had this conversation with Laura about an hour ago for Athena DAO, which is focused on women's reproductive health, or just women's health research, period. And they talked about how their interaction with other similarly geared entities in the space are sometimes not favorable. And so again, and I see this as a Black person as well, you have all these different groups that are trying to preach and push, Black inclusion and Black leadership and Black representation. But for whatever reason, they're not talking to each other. And it's like, it's never advancing beyond the point of, and there's almost this crab in a barrel mentality. So why do we have that? Is that something that we're suffering from in Web3? And John, please go ahead.
I want to bring it back really quick, and I think this does tie into what you're saying, but I think this ties to what Renee was bringing up before. It's like I've had enough of this online BS where we're pushing stuff sort of forward, but I'm going to go out to my local community and bring them in. And when I do that, I know exactly who I'm talking to, and it's my people. So Renee, if you brought that experience to DeSci, would anyone stand up and be like, oh my God, that's awesome, I want to help you? Whether it's an organization that already exists or just individuals in the space?
I have no idea. I guess I will find out.
Yes, because I think I love that approach to getting more people of diverse backgrounds and experiences into the space. Go to your local community and talk to the people you know and you want here to make you feel comfortable and at home. And I think what DeSci as a larger infrastructure needs to build as an ecosystem, and this goes to Jelani, what you were asking, is the means for these individuals who go out to continue to do it, to feel supported, to feel like they're doing the right thing, and then develop genuine organizations that are really trying to do what they're going out to do. And I think when you get that genuine aspect, you'll have less sort of crabs in a barrel, and you'll have more people working together in different aspects, trying different means to the same goal.
Well, I think that part of this crabs in a barrel is because, and when I say this space, I mean Web3 and decentralized. We're talking about blockchain technology and those things that help create these tools that we're implementing to make things decentralized. In this space, we're so early. We're early adopters. This is new. It's not. No one's late. I know people feel like they're late because of the buzzwords and things that are going on. You're not late, and because of that, everybody realizes the potential. Everyone realizes what can happen and how it can explode when it is mass adopted. And I think that everybody wants to be first. Everybody wants to be the one doing it. And because of that, you don't have people talking and collaborating, which this space is about. And so that's why the things that I do is kind of like what Renee was talking about. I talk about the integrity of the technology and the integrity of the space and trying to maintain that, because I think that gets lost when people start competing. Everybody's always asking me, what are you working on? What are you working on? Why do I have to be working on something as opposed to helping others build and thrive in that space? And I think that's what everyone's doing. Like, oh, it's not that. I think initially it started as I see a need, kind of like what Jelani was saying. I see a need, I'm going to address it. And then it was like, whoa, that person's doing great. I'm just going to make my own. I'm going to do my own thing rather than joining forces. And I think because it's so new, people see the potential and where this is going to go. And, you know,
yeah, it feels like
it comes down to
yeah, it feels like there's a
Benjamins, whatever, you know, all those things we say.
A misalignment of priorities. It's like the money is first, and then the movement is second. And when you build the genuine movements, the movement is always first. People are willing to sacrifice the money because they believe in the movement. And like you're saying, crypto and where we're coming from as a DeSci movement is very much Web3, and it's very much money first. And as we go out and find more people who align with the movement of whatever it is, whether it's just open science or if it is this diverse representation in the space, we're going to build better organizations that really don't prioritize profit. They prioritize their goals.
And I was just talking, I saw a comment. I was just talking about like Web3 in general. I don't necessarily know about DeSci and in the DeSci experience or those who are in science, but just in general.
I imagine it's the same. Ariella, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, I'm not sure if I understood like your original question completely, but my experience of the DEI community in Web3 and outside Web3, I would not describe in any way as crabs in a barrel. So I don't really know exactly what that specific experience is. Like, if I had to guess, I mean, I would say if you're doing something that's like a business and you start a business and have direct competitors, then yeah, you're gonna compete. That's not like DEI specific. So for example, like when NFT projects were, you know, had that boom, like if there are 3 different NFT projects that are supposed to be like, we are the NFT project for queer women, then yeah, you might not want to be sharing all your resources and insights with each other because that's a business that you're running. Like, you're trying to sell those NFTs, and why would you give a leg up to your direct competitor because you're trying to run a business? And in a similar, there was a, you know, you'd think that Gitcoin, for example, would have been similar. We had a DEI Gitcoin round, and we are directly competing with each other in the DEI Gitcoin round. But my experience was way more like lift everybody up together, in that like we had a giant group chat, like we were always like promoting each other. I think it helped that with Gitcoin in past rounds, you were able to have multi-tags. So people were like, we'll just make sure DEI gets the most votes and is able to pull funds from other groups, not just from our one DEI pocket. And like, side note, that's potentially changing in the next round, which is very sad. But I don't know. I did not get a crabs in a barrel mentality at all from the community, even when we had a group chat of direct competitors in the DEI funding round for Gitcoin. So I just disagree.
Could that be, and I gave the example of Athena, but could that be because you guys are not inherently a business? And thus, obviously, you fall within that criteria, but for somebody else who...
Yeah, I mean, well, but in the context of Gitcoin, we were all equally business minded because the whole point was literally to get votes to get a bigger piece of the grant donations. So it wasn't like, I don't know, our grants profit, whatever. Like, we were all directly competing for the same pool of money, which is the same kind of thing as business competition.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
But could that also be because people could vote multiply? Like there was not like a tragedy of the commons scenario with Gitcoin, right? So somebody could come in and vote for you at XYZ person, and then it just ended up being a tally. So you guys weren't fighting for votes because people could
Right.
vote all across the board.
So Gitcoin is a little different because of that.
Sort of, but it's still like, if once we hit the max where like once we hit the point where there were enough votes cast to completely deplete the matching pool, at that point, if somebody went and voted the exact same amount to every single organization, like nothing would happen. Like it becomes, at that point, you take money away from like group B if you give money to group A because of the way that quadratic funding works. So it's still a direct competition.
Okay.
But I think that's, I don't know. I just, like John was saying, I just see that as a little different, because I think you're in the competition knowing it's a competition, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to in the real world, you're doing things because unfortunately we have, quote unquote, and I'm going to use this just for distinction, but I don't know if it means anything, but the Web 2 mentality, right? Being the best, doing the best, and being the top 10 billionaires, trillionaires, whatever on the list. And I think that's the difference when we talk about collaboration and community in the general, like outside of something like a Gitcoin.
Yeah, I think I maybe phrased it badly. What I was saying was, like, for example, for me personally, in my experience with my organization, Web3 Women in Science, I have never felt like I'm competing with anybody ever, because that's not the point of what I'm doing. I'm not selling a product. The closest thing I ever had to feeling like I was in direct competition with similar organizations was Gitcoin. And even then, I did not feel crabs in a barrel mentality when that was the time when there would have been the most pressure for that mentality to occur. So in my specific domain, obviously there's a lot more pressure for it to occur if you are a for-profit business and trying to like pay out investors or whatever. So does that make more sense now? Yeah, okay, cool.
So I have one question because I like, so oftentimes, and it's very unfortunate, I feel like DEI discussions become a circular conversation more about the fact of DEI than actually how do we accomplish the next steps. And that's because it's a highly complex endeavor. And one of the ways that I find the easiest to kind of drill down to what's missing or what might potentially missing is to ask, what is and I'm very glad to have these participants who actually work or have DEI as a focus of them. What is, in your opinion, the most under-focused component that is needed to drive DEI or diversity and inclusion into a particular area, and in this case, science? So what is it that is not being focused on inherently, in your opinion, that we need to focus on more so to bring more diverse representation in science and then by proxy into DeSci?
Well, wait, I think those are two separate questions. So are you asking
Okay.
science or DeSci?
So to me, DeSci and science are the same.
I don't
let's
think
start.
so at
Let's
all.
start with science because
Well,
Tammy
start
did
with
respond to that. So Tammy, go for it.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Go.
Oh, so I was raising my hand. I'm sorry. But I just hearing this question, and for both of those, my answer would be the same. It would be belonging. And that's the feeling that I belong. And I think people are creating these spaces and saying you are welcome, but when you get in there, you don't feel like you belong. And I think that's it. People are getting the DEI, but they're forgetting the B. Right. And so now you're seeing things that are moving toward the B, and that's the belonging. And belonging is a feeling, and you can't tell me how I feel. It's internal. And so therefore, I think that's what's missing in science. And I think that's why there was this big STEM push a few years ago, just talking about general science and getting people in, diverse groups in science. But then in DeSci, it's transferring over. It's like, do I belong? And I think that goes into what we were talking about, going back to the beginning, the utility of it and how it applies to me, and how can I not only know about it, knowledge is one thing, but how can I apply that knowledge? How can I be involved? How can I be dancing and singing the lyrics and a part of the party, not just there? And I think that's what most of the groups are doing. They're making sure people are there. They're meeting a quota, which is why affirmative action has been they have done away with it, because people are there, but do they belong? Do they feel like they belong there?
And this is, I'm going to bring up what Renee is doing again. This is so powerful because Renee, you said you don't feel like you belong in this space. And so you're doing something about it, which is more than anyone can ask of you. You are going above and beyond to try to bring people into DeSci who will make you feel like you have a home here. And that's a failure of the current people in DeSci, exactly to what Tammy's saying. We don't make people feel like they belong here. They're welcome here with their whatever. Who cares? Like, we're all trying to build science. So my question is a little more tangible. How do we do that stuff? Speak to people who might not have ever built a community before, or don't know how to make people who are different than them feel like they belong. Is there a way to do that? Oh, Ariel, go for it.
So I just wanted to say, yeah, I agree. And the belonging is such a big thing. And for me, I break it down into issues of access and then, initial access and issues of attrition. And that's why I said I think these are separate questions, because I think the bigger problems are like which one is a bigger issue differs between like science and DeSci. So I think for like mainstream science, like what do you need to get into a PhD program? I mean, I guess Tammy or Doctor, or do you prefer to be called Dr. Francis?
No, I go by Dr. Tammy, but
Dr. Tammy, got it.
My parents call me that. It's not, I'm real.
Yeah.
More of a
so I think Dr. Tammy, could speak more on this than me, but my sense is that at least in the United States, we need to there are so many systemic issues going on that access is a huge problem in traditional science. And, all the inequity with, a socioeconomic inequity that starts so early, like in grade school, and then just keeps piling on and on. Is contributing heavily to lack of diversity, those issues in science. And then of course, attrition is also a problem. Like we see all the time that even if you can get the same number of women or the same number of Black people into like entry level positions, like, junior faculty, like once you get up to like the chair of the department, somehow it's all white dudes again. You're like, what the hell happened? And like that goes into the belonging, that's the attrition part. And it has to do with, culture. And then maybe also, I'm not an expert on this, so you can speak more, then maybe also some other factors like having children, and still having sort of the sexist pressures of like being the one to stay home. So obviously access and attrition are problems for both, but I do feel like DeSci is interesting in a different question, because I think at that point, it's more attrition than initial access. Like I think when people talk about DeSci, they're excited because they're saying maybe access won't be as big of an issue, because like maybe you won't need to go through all of the traditional gatekeeping checkpoints and, be able to get your daddy can get you into Princeton and you have a 4.0 or whatever. Like you don't necessarily need that to make it in DeSci, so that maybe access will be better. All you need is like internet and passion, right? But then you get into attrition, and I think attrition is a bigger problem in DeSci just because I'm super biased and that's my personal experience. Like I have never felt more unwelcome or in a space in my entire life than when I joined a DAO. That was the worst experience that like in terms of like, not personal experience, but like in terms of like workplace hostility and, like sexism and, or just people being dicks for no reason, who knows? Like that was absolutely the worst experience of my entire life. And that made me want to quit. And I did eventually quit. And a lot of other people did too. So, and I have not had, like, grad school sucks in ways that everyone who's ever been to grad school knows it sucks. And I've thought about quitting too, but it's not the same. It was not abuse, So I feel like we need to focus more on the attrition issue in DeSci. That's my opinion.
It's interesting. How? Right?
How?
I know that's a very difficult question to answer. Right?
Yeah, that would
So,
probably
like,
have to be a separate call. Like, and I also
know.
don't want to take up the time with like personal
Question of the
anecdotes,
day.
Right. So part of me thinks, and this is just off the top of my head, so it's very possible this is just a shit idea. But like there should be a DAO that it's not building anything. It's essentially Web3 Women in Science, but it's there for people who join DAOs and feel like their voice is not being heard in that DAO. So they can leave that specific DAO, but they don't need to leave the space. They can come find a place where they can feel at home.
Yeah, that was literally the whole point. Yeah,
that you had to make that. Yeah. So hopefully the space should support movements like that. Web3 Women, there should be more. I think that just are inclusive spaces for people to hang out.
Pay for me to go to conferences more. I'm here. Throw a travel grant my way.
That was actually a very good, Jelani, you're still muted. Sorry for cutting you off. But that was a very good tangible action that people organizing conferences can take. Actually build specifically travel grants for representation and only use them for representation.
Yeah. And you would think that would be obvious, right? But it's not. So I think to the point, DeSci, and to Ariella's actual point, the attrition rate is going to be governed by the social aspect and the culture of DeSci and what we're bringing forward. And I call to action, as we always do with this program. I would love to see DeSci projects start to build out their HR components, right? So if you're not a traditional entity that has an actual HR component and you're more of a DAO, I'd love to see you start factoring that in, right? Bring in, partner with Web3 Women in Science, whatever other social impact DAO, and incorporate that into your infrastructure such that your community has that level of support that is present there. I think the same goes for anything else, right? Even in the traditional science realm, you need more of that. So that's my 2 cents. That's what I hope to see with organizations moving forward with DeSci. Everything is very new here. We're talking about it as if it's a full-fledged movement. It's very much in its nascent phase and it's being built. So the focus is on building, but alongside that, and I think the only way to help emphasize that is to build in that social layer. So we're doing it here with this. That's the whole point of this. Web3 Women in Science doing it, Talent DAO is doing it. Everyone here is also being a part of that. Tammy, Lindsay, in her own way outside of Web3. Focus on that and lean on these participants so that they can help you build out a more inclusive, lower attrition rate in your group, in your organization.
I just want to super quickly, I won't go a speech, I swear, just like plus 1,000 what you said, and HR departments. And I'm so sick and tired of the one thing that makes me frustrated in Web3 and DAOs is like, we can do anything like a company, but without all of that boring like paperwork, like contracts and HR department. And I'm like, yeah, I get that you're bored by that, but like that protects people from you, like that is important. Like the number of lawsuits that they would have had on their hands if we were employees with contracts would have been sued into the ground. And people are not just like idiots, like they know that. And so like you have to be careful because DAOs can be predatory that way. Like you are working as an employee without any employment benefits or protections. That's not an innovation. It's crime. You know what I mean? Like I'm so tired of people being like, look at this innovation. And I'm like, sorry, it's like mirror. They're like, look at this innovation. And I'm like, you're holding up a crime. Stop.
Yeah, and I was going to add, talking about how. So these are the things that I think are important with getting people into DeSci, science, Web3, depending on your angle and how you choose to craft your messaging, is one, mentorship. Mentorship is important. If you are in this space and getting people in and onboarding people, that a mentor, and I think one, if you are in a position to be a mentor, then mentor, or a mentee, or find you a mentor. I think that's one thing, because I think that's part of it, because then that mentor becomes what I think is number 2, a sponsor. And getting someone to sponsor, to speak your name in the rooms where people like you are not represented. And they'll say, well, we're looking for one more person for this panel. Well, this person will be great. This is their topic of expertise, and they'll be great for the panel. And I think it's also being a sponsor and this idea of sponsorship. And I think that's what I mean when I say invite people to take up space in certain places. And I think the third thing is think really about, I'm really big on strategy for implementation. So when we're talking about DeSci, what does that look like? What is our actual approach? What is the goal? What is our actual goal? And I think that John and Ariella was talking about two different approaches, those from Web3 and those who are actually scientists, and how to do that. Well, what is our goal? And to go through that, I think those are kind of some of those things. And of course, I'm an educator, so I got to say number 4, education. I think it's all about educating people on what it really is and what it really looks like, and maintaining the integrity, not only of the space, the DeSci space, the science space, but also the technology, because many of this flows into Web3 because the technology that will make it decentralized involves the technology. And I think always start with the technology because that's the infrastructure. People want to go straight to cryptocurrency and wallets, but that's built on the technology. And I think if you know the technology and what it's capable of and how it really should operate, then that's where you start. So if I were to put it in 4 buckets, those would be my 4.
This is freaking. I'm going to add a 5th for you. It's, if you have a platform, at least share it. If not, give it completely up. If people listen to what you say, put someone next to you so that they're also there, and then eventually step away. That's similar to your mentorship. It's a little more open source philosophy, but there's so much power to just leaving the room and letting other people talk. So this said, those are wonderful actionable items that anyone in the community can take this past 5 minutes, stuff that we can build on. And this has also been an hour of just education for the space. So I truly do hope that people listen to this. I have personally learned a lot from the experiences of everyone here. And I hope that other people do too. I'm going to take this back. I know, Oksana, you said this in the chat. We're going to all take this back and try to implement it as best we can, and probably fail like 20 times. But we're going to learn from the failures and try again and keep sharing the failures and the experiences there, and just try to make it better, because we do have a clean slate where we can build inclusivity and belonging and make people feel at home from the very beginning. And we got to do that. And if we see people going out doing that for the space without any reward other than, hey, they want to feel like they belong here, support those people. Like, that is a huge task, going out and putting yourself out there in a personal community and like setting wallets up for people and bringing them into Web3. Like, that's a huge thing to do. So support those people. That said, we're going to wrap up. That was kind of a wrap up, but I want everyone to go around. If anyone has any last thoughts here, keep it relatively brief, but feel free. We can start with Oksana. I know you're down there. If you want to jump in with anything, go for it.
I should go and build just this. Build the community, I mean.
That's an interesting, actually, dichotomy. Build the tech and build the community. Okay. We can go up here. Renee, and then Lindsay, and then we'll go Tammy. Sybil, if this is one you want to unmute, by all means.
I don't really have much to say. I guess I will confidently say this is probably the last DEI panel I ever do, but thank you for having me here. And I would just comment that the reason we're not talking about all groups is because the title of this chat is DEI and DeSci. It's not onboarding in DeSci. It's not people in DeSci. And it's like, white privilege is real, male privilege is real, cis privilege is real. And if you have a problem with any of those statements, then I just don't have a ton of interest trying to convince you. So thank you. I think it was a good dialogue. I hope some action comes of it. I'm going to keep doing what I think I should be doing. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Great. Lindsay?
I think it was a good discussion. I think that these are not always easy conversations to have, but I think that they do need to be had, especially in such an early field like DeSci. Like, we have this extremely unique kind of time and thing that we can actively sculpt. I think these conversations need to happen. I think they need to happen now, while they are being sculpted. And I think that this needs to be a time for education to people in the community, people we're bringing into the community, so that together we can kind of sculpt it the way we feel it should be sculpted, with the ultimate goal of belonging.
Tammy, and then we'll go Ariella, and then Jelani, you can close this out.
Perfect. Thank you. So my platform is all about purpose, and making sure that you know who you are and where you're going, and anything that you do within that is in alignment. And I've already mentioned my 4 things, so I won't go back into that. And education is one of those. And if that's something that you're not clear on, then that's where you need to start. You need to start getting clear on that. And if your purpose is not to really maintain the integrity of this space and this idea of personal sovereignty and ownership and some of those other things, decentralization, what we're talking about, then what we said in the 90s, so now I'm showing my age, check yourself before you wreck yourself. And so check yourself. So thank you.
I'm so glad that got said today. Ariella, go for it.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I will second, what Renee said, Dr. Tammy said. To reiterate what I said before, like, think about representation, think about your messaging. If you want people there, name them. And being an ally is not being tolerant. Like, being tolerant is super bare minimum, like, good for you. You're like not a member of a hate group. Like, sure, if you want to go pat yourself on the back for that, fine, I won't stop you. But I would be happier if you like chose to do something that took your time or energy or money and like poured it directly into increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, that's what an ally is. And not every single person needs to be an ally, but just if you're about to call yourself an ally, I think you should be doing that. So if you're having a conference, like, don't be like, everyone's welcome. Be like, we're making sure that we're going to have this many, like this ratio of speakers. And if we aren't getting there by having open calls, we're going to institute quotas. And if we're still not getting there, we're going to reach out one-on-one to people and make sure they're fully funded so that there's no access issues, because we recognize like systemic inequity, and we're going to counteract that. Like, you have to actually do something. That's sort of my takeaway. Do something.
Awesome. So let's do something. That's why we're here. I'd like to reiterate Lindsay's point that this is a process, right? And you got to start somewhere. And I'd like to, make sure everyone understands that this is not an end point. This is a continuous progression on making sure that people consistently feel comfortable. Let's work on retention as well as access. And I'd like to thank all of our speakers here. The whole goal of this is to have this kind of open dialogue. It can sometimes be frictional, but the point is that it needs to happen. And not everybody's going to come from the same place, right? That's the point. The messaging is going to be different per person. And we need to kind of come together and have these conversations to find the best way to approach and retain as many people as possible. So for me, my final remarks are thank you, everybody, all the speakers here. Ariella, Sybil, you didn't say anything, but you were here in spirit, I guess. Oksana, Lindsay, thank you very much. Tammy, Renee, John, you, of course. I think this was a great conversation. I know we're going to have more in the future. And so I do hope that all of you will come back for future conversations of this. And I hope that everybody else listening really takes to heart and builds out their community and focuses on building the community in a way that is inclusive to all participants, and lean on these participants, lean on all of these people here, follow them on Twitter, go speak to them, reach out to them. And have these conversations that you need to have to make sure that your community is healthy, because that's really what we want, right? We want DeSci to not just exist; we want it to exist in its healthiest form. And so, with that, I guess we'll close out. This is our second episode of DeSci Rising. I think it was great. I very much enjoyed it. This is exactly the kind of stuff that I wanted it to be when John and I ideated this. I hope that we will see you guys again for our third episode, which will actually be a lot sooner than we anticipated it to be. And so, yeah, that's my closing remarks. Thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye,
and a great
everybody.
St. Patrick's Day. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.